Okay, so you want to run a meth lab, buy some cold medicine, set up a chemistry set in an RV somewhere in the desert, and cook your way to a fortune. That is the version most people have in their heads. A lone genius in a hazmat suit turning cheap ingredients into crystal gold. Here is why that picture is dangerously wrong. The RV cook, the backyard chemist buying Sudafed in bulk, was the meth industry of 2005. It does not exist anymore. Not in any way that matters. What replaced it is something far more interesting, far more profitable, and far harder to stop. Today, methamphetamine is not cooked. It is manufactured. On an industrial scale. In super labs the size of warehouses. By trained chemists working for cartels who import precursor chemicals by the shipping container from China. The finished product is 93 to 100% pure. It costs roughly $5 a hit. And it has completely rewritten the economics of the American drug market. In 2025, methamphetamine was identified in more DEA forensic lab reports than any other drug in the country. Over 323,000 reports. More than fentanyl. More than cocaine. More than heroin. The DEA seized 65,000 pounds of meth in just the first 7 months of 2025. And in September of that same year, federal authorities intercepted 1,300 barrels of precursor chemicals shipped from China to Mexico, enough raw material to produce 420,000 pounds of methamphetamine, with an estimated street value of $569 million in one shipment. This is not a cottage industry. This is a factory floor with a body count. And the economics of how it works explain everything about why it cannot be stopped. Let's break it down. There is not one type of meth lab. There are 3. And each one is a completely different business, operating in the same market. At the bottom, the shake and bake lab. 1 person. A 2-liter soda bottle. A handful of ingredients purchased from a pharmacy and a hardware store. This method is fast, portable, and requires almost no equipment. It can be done in a car. It can be done in a motel bathroom. And it has a roughly 50% failure rate, meaning half the time, the bottle explodes. The person making it gets chemical burns across their body. Hospital burn units across the Midwest have reported that up to a third of their patients were injured making meth. Treatment costs run $6,000 a day, and most of them are uninsured. The shake and bake cook produces a few ounces at a time. Street value, maybe a few $100s. Cost to make, almost nothing. Cost when it goes wrong, everything. Every pound of meth produced by any method generates 5 to 6 pounds of toxic waste. Battery acid, solvents, lye, red phosphorus. That waste gets dumped in trash cans, rivers, fields, motel room sinks. Cleanup costs run $2,000 to $3,000 per lab site. That bill lands on the taxpayer. In the middle, the domestic small lab. A rented house. A garage. A storage unit. Someone with a basic understanding of chemistry running a slightly more sophisticated operation, glass beakers, hot plates, ventilation, maybe a partner. These labs produce a few pounds per cook cycle. They were the backbone of the American meth supply from the 1990s through the mid-2000s. They are now almost extinct. And that extinction was not an accident. It was caused by a law. At the top, the super lab. And this is where the real economics live. In 2005, Congress passed the Combat Methamphetamine Epidemic Act. The idea was simple. The traditional recipe for meth required pseudoephedrine, a decongestant found in cold medicine like Sudafed. If you restricted access to the ingredient, you could choke the supply. The law worked exactly as designed. It moved pseudoephedrine behind the pharmacy counter. It required buyers to show ID, sign a logbook, and stay within strict purchase limits. 3.6 grams per day, 9 grams per month. The number of domestic meth labs in the United States collapsed. Small-time cooks could no longer walk into a drugstore and buy what they needed. Problem solved. Except it was not solved. Not even close. What actually happened is one of the most spectacular examples of unintended consequences in the history of drug policy. The law did not eliminate meth. It outsourced production to people who were far better at making it. Mexican cartels, primarily Sinaloa and CJNG, looked at the new restrictions and made a business decision. They abandoned the pseudoephedrine recipe entirely. They switched to an older, forgotten method called P2P, phenyl-2-propanone. This method had been used by biker gangs in the 1970s and was considered inferior. Lower yield, a messier product, but the precursor chemicals it required, phenylacetic acid, benzaldehyde, methylamine, were industrial chemicals used in tanning, gold mining, photography, and dozens of other legitimate industries. They were not regulated like cold medicine. They could be purchased in bulk, from China, by the shipping container. By 2012, the DEA found P2P meth in 96% of all seized samples. The old Sudafed recipe had been completely replaced in under 6 years. The purity of Mexican cartel meth jumped from 39% a decade earlier to 93 to 100%. The price dropped, the potency skyrocketed, and the volume became industrial. A super lab can produce 10 pounds of methamphetamine every 24 hours. One lab discovered in Arizona in 2026 was producing up to 1,000 pounds per week. It had been operating for 6 months before anyone found it. The Combat Meth Act was designed to destroy the meth industry. Instead, it handed the entire market to the most sophisticated criminal organizations on Earth. The mom-and-pop labs died. The cartels got a monopoly. The meth supply chain looks nothing like the cocaine supply chain. Cocaine starts with a plant. It requires land, climate, farmers, growing seasons. Meth starts with chemistry. It requires chemicals, equipment, and a recipe. That difference changes everything about the economics. Roughly 80% of the precursor chemicals used in Mexican super labs originate in China. They are shipped across the Pacific to Mexican ports, sometimes mislabeled as industrial solvents or cleaning agents. In September 2025, federal authorities intercepted 1,300 barrels containing 363,000 pounds of benzyl alcohol and 334,000 pounds of N-methylformamide on the open sea. Both precursor chemicals, both shipped from China, both headed for the Sinaloa cartel. The cost of these chemicals in bulk is remarkably low. The estimated cost to produce 1 ounce of meth in a super lab is roughly $100. The street value of that same ounce is approximately $800. That is an 8x markup. And unlike cocaine, the product never had to cross an ocean as a finished drug. It was assembled on site, close to the market, from legally available raw materials. Once manufactured in Mexico, the finished meth is transported across the U.S. border using the same infrastructure the cartels already built for cocaine and fentanyl: tractor-trailers, passenger vehicles, tunnels, and commercial freight. In July 2025, the DEA and its partners intercepted 705 pounds of methamphetamine hidden inside a truckload of cucumbers in Gainesville, Georgia. Once inside the United States, the distribution looks like any other wholesale business. The meth moves from border states, California, Texas, Arizona, into the interior. A pound of meth costs $3,500 to $5,000 in California, close to the source. That same pound in Alabama can cost $136,000. In Georgia, $45,000. In the Northeast, $21,000. The geography is the markup. The further from the border, the more expensive the product becomes. Not because the meth changes, because the risk of moving it increases with every mile. Let's do the math on what a single pound of meth actually generates. Production cost in a Mexican super lab, roughly $1,600. That covers precursor chemicals, labor, equipment, and electricity. Wholesale in California, $3,500 to $5,000. Wholesale in the Midwest, $8,000 to $12,000. Wholesale in the Southeast or Northeast, $14,000 to $21,000. Now break that pound into street-level sales. 1 pound is 448 grams. At a street price of $20 to $80 per gram, depending on the market and purity, that single pound generates between $9,000 and $36,000 in street revenue. And that is on the low end. But here is where meth economics diverge sharply from cocaine. Cocaine is expensive to produce, expensive to transport, and expensive to get across the border. The margins are high, but so are the costs. Meth is cheap to produce, cheap to transport, because it is made close to the market, and the precursor chemicals are legal until someone combines them. The margins on meth are not just high, they are structurally untouchable. A super lab producing 1,000 pounds per week, at a production cost of $1,600 per pound, is spending $1.6 million a week to produce product worth $5 to $20 million at wholesale. That is a margin cocaine cannot match, because cocaine requires a 3,000-mile supply chain through military interdiction zones. Meth requires a warehouse and a chemistry degree. This is the part that makes meth fundamentally different from every other drug in the underground economy, and it is the reason enforcement has failed to stop it. Cocaine requires coca plants. Coca only grows in specific climates in South America. You cannot move the farm. You cannot scale it without more land. The entire supply chain begins with geography. Destroy the fields, and you damage the supply. Heroin requires opium poppies. Same constraint. Specific climate. Specific geography. Targetable. Meth requires nothing from the earth. No soil, no sunlight, no growing season, no geographic constraint whatsoever. You need chemicals, heat, and a container. The lab can be in a jungle in Sinaloa, a warehouse in Arizona, a factory in Myanmar, or a basement in the Czech Republic. And it has been in all of those places. You cannot eradicate a meth lab the way you eradicate a coca field. There is no crop to spray. There is no harvest to disrupt. There is no season to wait for. A meth lab that gets raided on Tuesday can be rebuilt and operational by Friday, in a different location, with the same recipe and the same output. This is what makes synthetic drugs the future of the illegal drug economy. They are geography-proof. They are season-proof. They are, in every operational sense, the most scalable illegal product ever invented. Here is the part that separates meth economics from every other business model in the underworld. Cocaine has a customer retention problem. People use it recreationally, often on weekends, often in social settings. Many users maintain functional lives for years. The customer base is broad and relatively stable. Meth destroys its customers, fast. The drug burns through dopamine receptors so aggressively that long-term users suffer cognitive decline, psychosis, paranoia, tooth decay, extreme weight loss, and skin deterioration. A heavy meth user is visibly, physically consumed by the product within months. Unlike cocaine or marijuana, the customer base does not stabilize. It degrades. This creates a paradox at the center of the business. The better the product, the faster it destroys the people who buy it. A super lab producing 97% pure meth is selling a product so potent that its own customers cannot sustain the habit for long. They end up in hospitals, in prison, on the street, or dead. The business survives because it constantly recruits new users, and because the price is so low that the barrier to entry is almost nothing. $5 a hit, cheaper than a pack of cigarettes, cheaper than a six-pack of beer. The low price creates a conveyor belt of new customers to replace the ones the product has already burned through. This is the economic engine of meth, not retention, recruitment. Let's look at what happens over a year. The good year. A cartel-operated super lab in Sinaloa produces 500 pounds of meth per week. Annual output, roughly 26,000 pounds. Production cost at $1,600 per pound, $41.6 million. Transportation and logistics, $8 million. Corruption, $5 million. Payroll, $3 million. Total cost, roughly $58 million. Sold at an average U.S. wholesale of $8,000 per pound, $208 million in revenue. Net profit, roughly $150 million. From one lab, the bad year, the DEA discovers the lab. 2,000 pounds seized on site. A precursor shipment from China gets intercepted on the open Pacific. 400,000 pounds of raw material gone. 3 key distributors in Texas get arrested, freezing the corridor for 2 months. A rival organization moves into your territory while you are rebuilding. Revenue drops to $80 million. Costs stay fixed. Profit shrinks to $20 million. Enough to survive, not enough to expand. And the lab needs to be rebuilt from scratch in a new location, with new workers who may not be as skilled as the last crew. The gap between those 2 years is $130 million. The cause of the swing is not the market. The market is always there. The cause is enforcement, timing, and luck. 3 things no spreadsheet can predict. The Combat Meth Act destroyed the small labs. It was supposed to end the meth crisis. Instead, it concentrated production in the hands of organizations with the capital, the chemistry, and the logistics to operate at industrial scale. The product got purer, the price got cheaper, the volume got larger, and the body count climbed. Meth is now the most identified drug in DEA forensic labs in the country. It has surpassed cocaine. It has surpassed fentanyl in volume. And unlike fentanyl, there is no overdose reversal drug for meth, no naloxone equivalent, no rescue shot. A meth overdose is a medical emergency with no quick antidote. The economics of meth are the economics of synthesis. No farm, no field, no season, no geography, just chemicals, heat, and a recipe that fits on a single sheet of paper. You can ban the ingredients. The manufacturers will find new ones. They have already done it twice. You can raid the labs. New ones open faster than the old ones close. You can arrest the cooks. The recipe does not forget itself. Every attempt to regulate meth out of existence has made the product purer, cheaper, and more dangerous. The market does not respond to pressure by shrinking. It responds by innovating, and every innovation has made the problem worse. The RV in the desert was the old meth economy. The super lab is the new one, and the new one is winning.